Congratulations with the winners of the Property Investors Awards 2024. In this episode, we'll be speaking to the winner of Property Development of the Year, George. It's really great to have you on. Firstly, huge congratulations on winning Property Development of the Year at the Property Investors Awards. Huge congratulations.
Thank you very much, Gabriella. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And we're really pleased that you could come on today. But before we talk about the awards, I want to go back a little bit in time, if I can, and ask how your
Yep.
property career first started.
Oh, now we're going back. I'm going to show my age. Okay, so I must have bought my first house when I was 21. So we're going back, what, 17 years now? So yeah, going back some time ago, made every single mistake possible, but just thought it'd be a good investment. It's got told buy bricks and mortar. So I bought a house in Egham in Surrey, little one bed mid-terrace house. And it was empty for 9 months, but I was told it's a good investment. So I just didn't do much with it. And then finally got round to renovating it and realizing that I probably should get a tenant in there because that's how you earn money. So yeah, all the way back from there. And then was sort of, I wouldn't say I was hooked on property then, far from it. I was quite busy with my work at the time. And then over the years, got more and more involved in property and then went full time back in 2019 when I came back from living abroad in Dubai. Decided that I know what, I want to become a property developer because I thought that was what was in vogue and very sexy, and I was going to make billions of pounds. And yeah, but with very limited knowledge, only a handful of HMOs, a handful of buy-to-lets, and decided that I was going to embark on a new career. So that's where we are today. Fast forward, what, 6 years now? And yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about the projects we're working on, but that's how it all started.
Ooh, wow, that sounds really cool. And it's great to see how you've grown since then as well with your property business. So I want to go, before we get on to like the property development project, because that is quite a
Yeah.
story. But before
Yeah.
we get onto that, you've got your business George Bull Property and also Open View as well. So can you just tell our viewers a little bit more about that and how those businesses first started?
Yeah, so George Bull Property is just the brand. Realizing that you're very powerful as an individual, as a brand. But I've got various property businesses that focus in different parts. So I've got OpenView, which is our land development business. I've got Nimble Property, which is another part of our business that does more HMOs, shared living. I've also got another business that specializes in specialized supported housing. So all different facets, but all under a property umbrella. And one thing I always teach people is you can't stick with one strategy. Your job as a property developer, investor, is to spot opportunity. And to be able to do that, you need many skills, because that's what we're there to do, is just simply add value. So once you know how to add value in different avenues, different facets in property, there's so many opportunities.
That's some really good advice there for aspiring property investors for sure. And now I want to talk about the Property Development of the Year project that won you the award
Fine.
because it is a really great story. So please, could you just tell our viewers a little bit more about the project that won you the award?
Yeah, no worries. So I think this is probably where people, and I say this when I do presentations on this particular deal and this opportunity, is when people think that you won property development of the year, they think I'm building skyscrapers, 100 unit schemes. And the reality is it's quite different. And I'm sure, and I don't want to talk myself out of this, but I reckon there was probably some other developers in my category that made it to the final, that their deals may have been more profitable than mine. Okay. Maybe I'm underselling myself, but it's the story behind this particular opportunity is why I wanted to put it forward for a nomination, because it shows grit, it shows determination, it shows tenacity, and it shows never giving up. And I think if you can show those qualities and traits in a deal, it really does help sell the story. So a core part of my business, Gabriella, is as a property developer, My main role is director of acquisition. So I'm out there always looking for new opportunities. Where can we find a new site? And a lot of what we do is part of what we do is we look from on market opportunities, but the majority of our best deals have come off market. So when I say off market, they're not being marketed. So we've gone out there and found them ourselves. And then when we find an opportunity by using various different bits of software, we will then write a letter. And then once we write a letter, it goes onto our CRM system and we have follow-up letters, but we also categorize our sites. So our best sites that are in areas where we want to develop, where we know there's a need for affordable family homes, where we know that what we call the gross development value, the value of the sites over a certain threshold, we categorize our sites into gold, silver, and bronze. And gold sites, we don't just send letters out, we will go and knock on the doors. So the letters will go out on the Monday and we'll go and knock on the door and introduce ourselves. It may not necessarily be me, it may be one of the people that work for us, one of the young ladies that work for us. And our goal is to introduce ourselves and to say, look, guys, we believe that your garden, your plot of land, your land adjoining your house has some form of development potential. As a local SME developer, we would love to sit down with you and talk you through this, as this potentially could be, some life-changing sums of money for you. And this is no different to this deal. Now, all the way back in 2018, 2019, before the likes of a lot of these online platforms, the likes of Nimbus Maps, Land Insights, Searchland, some of your audience may be familiar with that, but they are tools to find potential development opportunities, and they're like mapping software. Now, before all they became to the mainstream, us land directors and the guys that I learned from would drive around and look for sites, and they would use another tool that was something called ProMap. It's kind of like a mapping tool, but we would look for opportunities. And this particular area is an area quite close to where I used to live in Epsom in Surrey. And certain areas lend themselves to development opportunities more. Number one, the local authorities may be more pro-development. So if we're putting in a planning application, we want to know that there are areas that are quite keen on development. We want to know there are areas where there's demand for the houses that we build. And Epsom ticks the boxes for us. But the way in which the Epsom has been designed post-war is they haven't utilized land space very well. So there's a lot of houses that have been built post-war that have got huge, great big back gardens. Now, big back gardens is what we love. We're what we call garden grabs, land assembly. So what my core strategy has been over the years is look for gardens that we can buy, but multiple gardens. So maybe not just one garden, because you can't build a house in one garden. But if we speak to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 neighbours, we can now create something of value. With their garden on their own has no value, but with 3 of the landowners together and 3 gardens, we may be able to build 2, 3 houses. Does that make sense?
That does, yeah.
So this particular opportunity was near in Epsom, where I know there's huge, great big back gardens. When I say big back gardens, from the rear elevation of the house to the back of the garden, you're probably looking at about 60 meters, which is huge, really long, great big gardens. But the problem they have is a lot of these gardens are what we call landlocked. So there may be lots of great space at the back there, but you can't get to these gardens via vehicular or pedestrian access without knocking down a house or without looking for an opening. Does that make sense, what I'm saying there? So,
Yeah.
fortunately, buying a house and knocking it down to get access to land at the back is a way that you can do it, but you need a lot of to knock down a house, you need to create a lot more units. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it eats away a lot of the profit in the deal. So we're always looking at, is there a way that we can get vehicular access? Now, vehicular access is about 5 meters. Okay, and that's a 2-way passing point. That means 2 cars can pass. So we can look at a site and go, okay, well, we can't get to that land, but we can either knock a house down, or is there an opportunity we can perhaps knock a garage down? And that's exactly what we had with this opportunity. There was an opportunity. I used to walk my dog, and I did the age-old thing. I sort of looked down this road. I know there's big gardens here, but I can see a garage here that's a detached garage. If we knock that garage down, I believe that land at the back, we could certainly get 1 dwelling. But if we put multiple gardens together, we could get 2 or 3 dwellings. So I got home, did the thing where we write letters, and to give you an idea of our site volume, we write about 1,000 letters a month. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
always looking for sites, and that's how we've got a constant pipeline. When people are going, George, how's your pipeline always full? It's because we have got a proactive system to finding these type of sites. We have people that I've taught now that are on these software, and we're constantly sending out sites. And once you found all the sites in your area, you've now got a database, and it's a case of them working that database. But I did the thing, this was back in 2018, to give you an idea, 2018, and I wrote the letter to the landowners. And because it was quite local, I didn't bother posting it. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to knock on the door and give it to them and introduce myself as Director of Acquisitions. We're a local house builder. We're looking for new sites. And I knocked on the door, and it's very rare, I'll be honest with you, that people go, oh, yeah, I was waiting for your call, coming for a cup of tea. He actually said, "What? Hello, George. Yeah, pleasure. Great. Do you want to come in for a cup of tea and we can have a chat?" So I thought, great, this is quite a positive start. Normally we get the door
Yeah.
slammed in my face or the curtains twitch and people don't answer the door. So he invited me in for a cup of tea, and I said, "Look, I'm very interested. I think the land at the back of your house has huge potential for development, and I think alongside with your neighbour's garden, we could probably build a very, very sustainable site, a site that I think would be very much in need with the local community. Um, would you be interested in having a chat further?" He said, "You know what, George, I would be, but I'm going to be really upfront and honest with you. I'm already dealing with another developer." I went, "Oh."
Mm.
So I missed the boat. He said, "Yeah, another developer. We're at advanced discussions. We haven't signed any contracts yet. We verbally agreed on a price, but we're just going backwards and forwards, just working on the finer detail." I said, "Well, look, you've got no harm in having a chat with me. Why don't you give me 2 weeks? I can go away. And when I go away, I'm going to do some due diligence on the site, look at what we call site constraints, look at what we can get on there in terms of massing, because the more houses we can get on there, in theory, the more we can offer as the land value to you and your neighbour. But I'm not going to go away. I want to go away and do some proper homework, and I need to engage with my professionals. So my planning consultant, my architect, my highways consultant, and we will do a very sort of, I wouldn't say it's quick and dirty, far from it, but we will do a due diligence piece, which takes about 2 weeks. And then I'll come back and present to you what we found and also our offer. She said, "That sounds really fair, George." I said, "But it's really important. I'm not just interested in your garden. Without your neighbour's garden, this is a no deal." He said, "George, that's great because my neighbour's actually already engaging with the other developer as well. So the other developers made it very clear." So this is what we call a land assembly. So you're assembling two titles, two separate titles to create something. That garden on its own has no development potential, and I make that clear to landowners. But with both of you as a unit, we can now get um, a potential development on there. He said, "That sounds fair, George." So I came back, it's generally 3 weeks later, 21 days, and I do a presentation, which is quite unique, but we like to do a bespoke presentation because I've worked in financial services. Anyone that's worked with a financial advisor will be aware, Gabriella, that a financial advisor does what we call a fact find and finds out all the information on the client before presenting a product, before presenting an opportunity, whether it's a savings plan, whether it's an insurance product. They're bespoking it to that client. And we do something very similar. So I want to find out all the pain points. So when I come to presenting an offer, I really understand it's more than just a number a lot of the time. It's all the little things that make the deal work. So I'll give you an example. Some landowners we deal with, we may look to help them with moving. We may help them with, I've had landowners where I've got their children and themselves a weekend at Euroland Disney. Do you know Disneyland in Paris?
Yeah,
Little
yeah.
things like this where it gets the deal over the line. And I came back and presented an offer, did a really professional presentation to both the landowners and said, "Look, I'll buy your gardens, okay, but this is what I think we can get on there." And I showed them the scheme, and it was a development of 3 houses. And I went, "George, absolutely love it. You've been really, really professional, got a really good feeling about you. But unfortunately, the other developers offered considerably more than you."
Mm.
I said, "Considerably more?" I said, "I would probably look into that a little bit more if I was you." He said, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, look, all us developers, we build at similar sort of margins, okay? And we have to make similar profit margins. And the only variable here is that, do you mind me asking, what has he put forward? What does he say that he thinks he can get on the site?" "George, he's told us categorically we can get 5 houses on there." I said, "Look, I really don't think that's possible. That's massively overdevelopment. I can't see how you can do that. But if that's what you want to go ahead with, please. But just be aware that when you get into contract with someone, it's going to be a 2-year contract and you won't be able to get out of that. So it's what we call a subject to planning contract. So when these developers put forward an offer, we'll buy your garden for X, subject to it's a conditional offer, as long as we get planning permission within the allotted time frame. He said, yeah, I understand that, George, but look, we're going to go with the other guy. So I said, no worries. So the key and the moral in this story, this was back in 2018, 2019. And remember what I said, the key is always in the follow-up. So that goes back into our CRM system. And every 6 months, they'll get another letter from us, just letting them know we're here. If anything changes, because people may say no, but they're only saying no at a time because it doesn't work for them. But as we know, circumstances change. Children go off to university. People are retiring. People are moving for work. And now they want to talk to you. So we followed up and we followed up. 18 months later, I got the phone call from one of the landowners. He said, George, how you been? I said, great, Matthew, how have you been? He said, I want to talk to you. I've got a problem. I went, go on, what's your problem? He said, we went and worked with the other developer. He's done exactly what we thought, what you said he might do, is he's moved us on the price on 4 occasions. So he started here and what we call chipped him down and chipped him down and chipped him down. And we don't want to deal with him anymore. But do you know what, George? You know that scheme that you put forward that you said, this is what's likely we're going to get? That's exactly what we've got planning permission for now. The developer's contract ends next month. Would you be interested in buying it off me? So he's now got the planning permission. Now, normally that's what we do. What we call cradle to grave. We find a site, we get the planning permission, we build it out, or we sell it on with planning permission. Now, this site's already got planning permission. I said, okay, Matthew, that's great. Well, let's talk. How can we make this work? He said, there's a bit of a problem though, George. And that problem is we'll deal with you, but we don't want to sell the garden anymore. We would just want to sell our house. So as you can imagine, I can't visually represent this because I can't on a Zoom call, but what the site was looking like was we were looking to split the title. So when we say split the title, where they have that lovely, great big long garden, we were looking to take a section of that garden from the neighbours and Matthew's house, and we were creating a new access down the side of the house by knocking down the garage, which was going to be the access from the main road going to the backland site at the back. For these 3 houses that were three 3-bedroom houses that we put forward, that was like a muse style development, like down a cul-de-sac in a really nice part of Epsom. But he said, look, George, we're not interested in selling the land. We're only interested in selling the houses now. Now, these houses, Gabriella, were quite expensive houses. They're around £750,000 each house. This was back in 2019, just before the pandemic. And he said, look, we'll sell them to you, but we also want a decent premium on top of that, circa around £100,000. So he wanted 850 and the neighbour wanted 850. And these houses were worth 750. But if I bought the houses, I'd get the development at the back. But as we're aware, buying houses, as I told you, there's entry and exit costs. We've got stamp duty fees. We've got to borrow money now, 1.7 million to buy those houses, when the land at the back's probably worth about 500, 600,000 pounds. So it doesn't make sense. No SME developer is going to buy the houses just for the land at the back. Well, he said, that's what I want, George. We're coming up to retirement. The thought of selling our land and then selling the house separately, which is what I suggested to him, which was the most profitable way, by selling the land at the back and then selling his house later on, once that development's been built, he would make a hell of a lot more money. But he said, I'm not interested. I just want to retire now. And the same with Dennis. Now, Dennis is 83 years old. And very switched on, very shrewd negotiator as well. But they didn't want the hassle. Imagine them to sell your land, okay, then the development takes place and you've got all that building work going on the back, okay, and then you have to sell your house. So I said, well, look, guys, I don't think there's anything we can do. And no SME will be able to afford to do that. And the only people that will look to buy a site of 3 houses, it won't be your regional or your national house builders. It's too small. So you're only dealing with people like us that are building 10 to 30 units a year. And we won't do it. However, I have got a creative way that I think we could make this work. It's something what we call a subsale. Now you want to sell these houses for 850 each, and I'll buy both houses for 850. But I need an agreement with you that I'll exchange on a small amount, okay? And that amount at the time I think was about £5,000 each house. I tried negotiating a pound, but they wouldn't do that, okay? But I need 12 months to try and sell the house. You went right. So you need to give me unfettered access for people to come and view the house. But when they come and view the house, I also need agreement with you that you're happy for me to put up a permanent fence. So when people come and view the house, they don't see this lovely, great big garden and what you could have won. You see the garden, the space, the permanent fence, which is the reduced title, which is now a smaller garden. Does that make sense there, Gabriella? Because what happens is when people come and view these houses, and I'm saying, look, there's going to be a development happening in the back there, and normally we put a string measurement. You might have seen it when builders and surveyors put strings. People go, yeah, but I want the garden, Jordan. I'm like, the garden's not for sale. This is only the bit for sale. So I had to take that elimination out their head. Now, the difficult part that we've got is we don't know the value of what these houses are worth with a reduced title. So this was in the height of the pandemic, and you can probably remember during the height of the pandemic, a lot of people wanted garden space, okay, because we've been cooped up. And I'm thinking, what's the value of these houses? Because we've agreed to buy them at 850, but hopefully we're going to sell the house with the reduced title at a number. Now, we assumed that we were going to be able to sell both these houses for around £600,000, okay, which meant that the £600,000 that we bought house one and house two, the price that we agreed with the vendor was 850. So the price between 600 and 850 was essentially what we're buying the land for. Does that make sense? So we said, you know what? Let's go and speak to lots of agents. Now, we spoke to lots of agents, and no agent could give us a value because they're like, George, I don't know what the market is like at the moment where someone says, I'm buying a big 5-bedroom house, which is a family house, and you're giving them a small garden. What value does a garden have at the moment? No one knows. So we assumed that we were going to sell the houses for 600. We agreed the deal with both the landowners. They said, okay, George, but just so you're aware, if you don't manage to sell the houses within the 12 months, legally, I'm obligated to complete at £850,000. So the pressure was on. The day we exchanged contracts, within a week, I had them all advertised. We had viewing days backed. And this was also around the time of the pandemic. Can you remember? People got to put their memories back. But people were buying houses really quickly. Okay. There was all this pent up demand where people being, cooped in. And remember that there was that stamp duty, there was all that period where solicitors stopped working. There was all this pent up demand where people wanted to move. And we must have had about 40 viewings over a weekend.
Oh, wow, really?
So we had a lot of interest. But also remember, one of the negotiation points was this was the height of the pandemic where you couldn't do group viewings. You had to do one at a time. Okay. You had to wear your face masks. We've also got people that are quite elderly that were quite high risk to the disease. So there was all these things that we had to work, and we had to ensure that they couldn't be in the property when these viewings were taking place. And great news, we sold the houses the first weekend. Superb. And we sold them for a lot higher than we were expecting. So bearing in mind, we thought we were going to sell the houses for £600,000. We sold one, which was Matthew's house, I think at 660. And then Dennis's house, who was the old boy, we sold at 665. So straight away, we made £120,000 equity on our numbers that we weren't expecting. Win. But as you can imagine, we've got to try and put the fears of these buyers coming in, because the more questions they have, what's going on in the back of there? Is a development? Oh, we're not sure. We had to create CGIs, and I had to be there and give an explanation from the developer's point of view. We had to create CGI images of how the development's going to look from their gardens, how overbearing it's going to be. I had to put their mind at rest that we're good developers, that we're going to be working with you for the next 12 months. There is going to be a little bit of noise of disruption initially, but you won't even hear us after 3 months once we've done the foundations. Because the more question marks people have, the more opportunity, Gabriella, people have to negotiate. That 600 soon becomes 580, 590. So I had to alleviate all concerns and say, look, this is what we're looking to do. This is who I am. These are the CGIs. And we sold the houses. Great. But we had to use specific solicitors that are familiar with these type of transactions. And we had to explain to the people that are buying these houses, you can't use your solicitors because your solicitors won't understand this type of contract and how the sale has to go through. So we had a lot of people put off by that. They said, what do you mean you've got to use solicitors that are commercial solicitors that are familiar with these type of contracts? So there was a lot of caveats. So I'm now painting the picture. I've probably gone into quite a detailed picture here, but great news. We sold both the houses, but unfortunately one of the sales fell through. So we had to remarket that. And like I said, the issues that we had with viewings was people want to come and view the house on a Monday or a Wednesday. And we had to organise for the vendors, the landowners, the people who own the house to leave the house. So they didn't want to keep leaving the house because they were old. So we had to like
Yeah, and
work.
obviously like the pandemic as well, like they didn't want to leave. Yeah.
No, and then we had to always buy them lunch. Look, go down to the garden centre. Lunch is on me. Spend the day down there. Take the grandchildren down there. We're trying to get as many viewings as we can.
Yeah.
It was just it was hard work. Okay, but like I said, we sold the houses. So we now needed to sold the houses. We've got the site that's got planning permission, but we need to enhance the planning permission because we saw opportunities that we could increase the value by tweaking certain elements, by increasing the height of the building, by building up into the loft. We could get an extra bedroom. So our job is always looking at how we can add value. So we added value by tweaking the plans. We've now also, like I said, sold the houses. But the exchange and completion of those sales had to go through. We had 12 months, and we need to make sure that people buying were making the right noises and were going through the process as quickly as possible. Because if a sale fell through after 5 months and we had to remarket it, it's getting really close to the wire. So we
Yeah.
need to be very, very selective on who our buyers were. So we had 5 or 6 offers come in, but some of the offers were higher than the ones we accepted. But it's about digging down deeper. Where are the funds coming from? Are they in a chain? Okay, how badly do they want to move? How much have they fallen in love with the house? Because there's all these psychological things that we need to consider, because if we took a buyer on and they stretched it out for 6 months, 5 months, and then fell through, it'd be too stressful. We'd be leaving it right up to the wire. We'd have to remarket it. Fortunately enough, like I said, one of the transactions fell through, but we sort of got to that quite quickly, and then we managed to remarket and we sold it again. So that was all going well. So you can imagine this whole process now, from me sending that first letter at end of 2018, we're probably
Yeah.
now in 2020, coming into 2021.
Oh wow, yeah.
So it's a long process.
No.
Then then we had the situation where, because the sales went through so quickly, the landowners, the vendors, weren't expecting the sales to go through as quickly as they were. Now, we want to make sure that these sales happen as quickly as possible.
Okay.
But the sellers were saying, well, George, we thought we had a lot longer. We haven't even started thinking about packing. And you're saying that these people are going to complete in 10 weeks. Okay. We haven't found anywhere to live. So this is where going the extra mile, and they wanted to pull out the deal because they were like, this is too much. It's too stressful. We've got COVID. We've got too much going on. And I'm like, guys, you've signed a contract. Okay. You need to work
Yeah.
with me here. But I had to alleviate their fears. Okay. So a lot of the time people get really overwhelmed by the smallest things. So what we had to do is we had to help them find a home, both parties. So they wanted very specific areas that they wanted to live in. So we had to find them somewhere to rent because they didn't have enough time to buy. Okay. And bearing in mind, renting when you've been living in a house for 30, 40 years, you've got a lot of stuff in storage. Where are you going to put it? They wanted to downsize to a bungalow. So me and my team had to constantly be sending them properties where they could move to that were close to their family, because they were very specific. One of them wanted to live in Tunbridge Wells, within a mile and a half of his granddaughter. And we had to keep trying to find, and you can imagine a lot of properties to rent aren't up to the standards of the house they were living in. That's awful. Me and my wife can't live there. It was hard work, but we managed to find them somewhere to live. We managed to help them with all the moving items. So it's all these little things that get deals over the line. Okay. And this is what people don't teach in courses. It's psychology. It's being a good human and trying to find solution to problems. So we finally managed to get them to move out. We found them both rented properties to live temporarily until they could find somewhere they want to move to, because they're both obviously downsizing now. And the build was the easy bit. Build took us 12 months. We sold the houses within, well, it was quite difficult actually. The build took place about 12 months. We got the sites ready. It takes about 6 months to get the sites ready as we're just
Yeah.
planning. And we started building in March 2023. We
Oh,
finished
wow.
development March 2024. But also, if you cast your mind back to anyone that's in selling houses, house builder, it was a very difficult time from March last year, all the way, well, it still is. It's a difficult time selling new build houses, but simply because of finance, interest rates, and obviously we were just before the election last year, and a lot of people were very apprehensive because they didn't know what changes were going to happen with the stamp
Mm.
duty. And we found with these houses that we were building, the end user was different to what we thought. We thought the end user, so the houses we were building were 3-bedroom houses, very modern in a very smart part of Surrey. And we were advertising them at £700,000. So quite a high ticket, quite high value areas. And the people that were coming to view the properties, believe it or not, were first-time buyers. So it just gives you an idea of, where different parts of the country, how things work. And a lot of the time, first-time buyers, they are getting help and they were having the viewings with mum and dad. So what we call the bank of mum and dad. Mum and dad were
Yeah.
helping them out. They perhaps living in rented accommodation for 6 years. But with the uncertainty of stamp duty, what's happening, what happens if the Labour government comes in, because this was back in March, we started to panic because we got so used to selling houses during the pandemic and things were just flying. You put it on the
Yeah.
market on a Saturday and on the Monday you have an offer. No, we had to think very strategically about this. So we had to really think about how we do our opening day, how we market the development before. We had to set up QR codes on our hoarding boards so people could zap them and get a look for the virtual tour, and we'd have a drone fly through and we'd have to do all these CGI, and we have to stage these houses, okay? Because the most one of the largest costs that people overlook is time. Time is your biggest cost in any development, and especially where you've got borrowing costs like we had. Every month where those houses don't sell is costing us hugely.
Yeah.
So it's about obviously finishing the development as quickly as possible, but you've also got to have a marketing strategy in place, how you're going to sell these houses in a market that people have no real motivation to move at, because they're sitting there going, well, I've been in rented accommodation for 6 years now, and mum and dad would be in there and go, let's just wait till see what happens in May. And I'm like sitting there going, oh my God.
Yeah,
So
you're like,
yes, absolutely. But the good news is we sold all 3 houses fairly quickly, not as quickly as we'd like. We had to, like I said, we had to go the extra mile. We had to offer incentives, but we sold them each house on average for 700,000. The GDV of the site was 2.1 million, so the gross development value. There was lots of other stuff that we did was really creative, where there was another parcel of land attached to the land that we put in a planning application for another dwelling. But I haven't mentioned that today because that's still in the process. But that gives you an idea of the whole journey. And this is what I'm saying
yeah.
about perseverance, finding. And I think the way in which we documented that in our application for the
Mm.
Property Investor Awards. I
It's-
don't, it's the perseverance, it's following up from a
Yeah.
letter that started off in 2018 to finally building 3 beautiful family homes that are much needed in an area where there's not many new builds because there isn't much land. And unfortunately, it's a very difficult area to get planning permission for. But we did it. And
Exactly, you did it.
we
It's
did.
amazing because honestly, like I just like it's thank you so much for telling that story because I think you just need to show like the journey of it and how many challenges. I mean, you had a global pandemic. Literally, you had to deal with that as well. And like I think for people watching and they're seeing you overcome all these challenges and they're thinking, if I have a challenge, how do I overcome that? So do you have like any advice for that for people
Yeah,
watching?
look, there's always a solution. There's always a solution. You've got to keep calm and level-headed, okay? Because when you start panicking and sales fall through and you've got the bank knocking on your door and
Yeah.
you've got to keep calm, cool, and collective, okay? But one of the most important lessons to always learn is there's always someone that's gone through the same thing that you have and got to the other
Yeah.
side. So
Yeah.
find out who in your net, and this is why I think people talk about network, but this is why it's about leveling up your network and having a network of people that have been there and done it before. So I would call
Yes.
on other developers that have been in the game 30, 40 years, that have made millions, lost their shirt, come back, done it again, learned from that. That is how we got through it. There's always a solution. Okay. Of course, people weren't, I mean, we were very fortunate that we weren't building during the pandemic. Okay. We
Yeah.
were after the pandemic, but that had its own challenges as well. We saw contractors going bust on what we call fixed price contracts. So they would agree a price to build our development out. But you saw a lot of contractors because obviously labor costs went up, but more importantly, material costs went through the roof. If you're a contractor and you're in a fixed price contract and you've agreed that, but you're seeing your costs going up every day and you can't deliver it
Yeah.
because you're going to go under, we had to have conversations with our contractors. Like, guys, how are you doing? Is your head above water? You know, what's the situation here? And this is why we will only work with certain main contractors on one project, because if you see people that use the same contracts across four or five, that contractor goes under, you are in a world of pain.
So much for that advice there, George. As I've literally just been saying throughout this interview, honestly, it is such a story, your property development project of the year. And I think people will, like, honestly, I'm just amazed at how many overcame so many challenges literally during a global pandemic as well, because as we said, like, bless Matthew and Dennis, like when you were just taking them out to the
Yeah.
garden center and stuff like that. So yeah, I just want to say, like, huge congratulations on that project. And now going on to the awards itself now, firstly
Yeah.
I have to ask, how does it feel since you've won the award?
Yeah, it feels good. Yeah, it's obviously it's good to have a little bit of recognition for the hard work, and it's always good to be recognised. And it does open a few more doors. And I probably haven't used it as much as I should do, being really honest, because we've just been so busy. We've just been so busy on to the next project that comes with its new challenges. And but yeah, it's obviously great, and it's something I always, when I got into property properly full time as a developer in 2017, 2018, when I said this was the pinnacle, because the people that I was looking up to were winning these awards. And I said to myself, I'm going to win that. I'm going to win that. And it's a little bit of internal validation to know that, you know, what you set your mind to and you can achieve. And it was the pinnacle. It's kind of like, okay, well, look, what do we want to do with this? What recognition is? I'm not an egomaniac at all, but it's always good to have that recognition and have a goal and say, well, we're looking at doing this. Our mentors that taught us a lot of this were winning these awards, and now it's kind of flipped round. So yeah, really good.
Oh, well, that's really, really great to hear. And yeah, it just goes to show, like, if you put your mind to it and if you believe in yourself, look at what you can achieve. And I want to ask as well, would you recommend people to apply to the Property Investors Awards as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, if you've you can apply. I think normally you have to get a nomination from someone as well. But if you've got something, you know, and you think it's a good opportunity, put it forward. You know, if you've got the story and the numbers work, but I tell people, you know, it's a full-on process. It's a very detailed application. So you need to know your numbers inside out, back to front. You need to have the proof, the evidence. So it's a very thorough process. And I think there's something like 45, 50 judges that all go through every single application. They score it. So it's yeah, to get obviously you got the judges that are people that I look up to and respect, you know, to have their sort of seal of approval is obviously great as well.
Yeah, that's really, really great. And I wasn't there on the night, unfortunately, for the awards, but it's really good for networking and stuff like that as well, right?
It is, it's really good. You know, you can imagine you've got a room full and it's getting bigger and bigger each year. We were in the finalists the year before, but this year was certainly the biggest that I can remember. And it's good. It's a good evening. You know, there's a lot of networking, a lot of people there that are obviously your peers, and a lot of people doing bigger and better things. So it's always good for me to sort of to go and speak to those people. What are they doing now? How are they doing it? How did they overcome that challenge? But it was also nice to sort of see people and not always talk shop all night and property all night, but it tends to go that way.
Oh, well, that sounds really, really great. So I hope that anyone that's watching does consider to apply to the Property Investors Awards. And now finally, you've been giving some really good advice to aspiring property investors throughout this interview. So thank you. But if there is one piece of advice that you could give to aspiring property investors, what would it be? I know that's a hard question because it's only one.
Yeah. Um, I think expect the unexpected. Um, if you're comfortable with the fact that things are going to go wrong, you'll be all right. Okay. It's just inevitable, no matter how experienced you are. Every single project, there is a challenge of some sort, but it's about looking at those challenges at the end of the project, no matter what project it is, debrief what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we learn? And it's constantly refining that system that saves you thousands and time, and you realize that we can do that differently this time, and that worked really well. Everything's just feedback, everything's data. So just remember that, but just expect the unexpected. There are going to be challenges. Deal with it, get on with it. There's a solution, and try and bigger's not always better. And I think in the world of property, people think that as well. If you find a niche and it works, why change? Stick to it. And I see too many people that start off on this and they go to this and they go to this and they're like, well, now I want to build, a 50 unit scheme. I'm like, why do you? Why? Tell me why. And a lot of the time it's just working out what you're good at, stay in your lane and literally just refine that system.
Thank you so much for that advice, George. Some really helpful tips there, and I think it's just the perfect way to end the interview. Thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. And once again, huge congratulations on winning Property Development Project of the Year at the Property Investors Awards, and best of luck in the future.